Welcome back. In this quick tip, we would be looking at another interesting data type in Python called the tuple. Now, what is a tuple? When do you use it? And how is it different from a list? Let's look at it right now. Let's define a simple method. Let's say def, I'll call this create Ranga, and let's return Ranga, comma, let's say the date of birth as well as the country. Is this really allowed? Yep. We are returning multiple values from this method. So in a single statement, we are returning 3 different values back. Now let's see what does it create. Let's take it in a variable called Ranga and say create Ranga. Now, what's the type of Ranga? It's of type tuple. Tuple is nothing but a set of values which are separated by comma. Now let's say I want to take Ranga and assign his values to 3 different variables. Let's see what to do. Name, year, comma, country is equal to Ranga. What would happen? Let's see. So what's in Ranga? It's a tuple. It's represented by a open parenthesis, a close parenthesis. That's what Python uses to represent a tuple. If I look at name, Ranga, year, 1981, country, India. So what is happening in here is when we return multiple values, we are creating a tuple and that's being returned back, and Ranga is of type tuple. What we are doing in here is called destructing. We are taking a tuple and we are assigning the values from the tuple to 3 different variables. Name, comma, year, comma, country is equal to Ranga, and you can see that name, year and country are assigned the right values. The thing is, on the tuple you can do a number of operations. For example, I can do a length of Ranga. What does it return? 3. I can say Ranga of, so you can use an index to retrieve the values, Ranga of 1, Ranga of 2. That's allowed as well. Now let's try and change a value. So I'm saying Ranga of 1. Ranga is not born in 1981. I would want to reduce my age. It does not allow you to do that because a tuple is by definition immutable. The values in a tuple cannot change. So once you create a tuple, it's immutable, and for that reason, in certain situations, tuples might be more efficient to use than a list. Now, the main difference between list and tuple is typically a list is a number of values. So a list of numbers, but a tuple is a set of attributes of a specific thing. Here I'm storing a person and his related attributes. So a tuple typically stores details about a specific thing, and a list stores a number of things. So that's how you do things typically, but certain places where the values in a list do not change. So if you have a static list, it might be good to represent it as a tuple because tuple is much more efficient. Accessing values from tuple is much more efficient than accessing values from a list. Let's now look at a few simple tips regarding usage of tuples. So over here, we saw that we actually return multiple values from the method, and that's how we created the tuple. But easier way of creating a tuple would have been to directly initialize the values here, right? So I can say person is equal to, and say Ranga, comma 5, comma India. This is the easiest way. You can also create the same thing by not even having the parentheses around it. So if you look at the type of person, it would remain tuple. And once you have a tuple, you can assign it to a set of variables. So you can say things like name, comma, age, comma, country is equal to person. We looked at that already. What would happen if I have lesser number of variables in here? Obviously, it would throw an error. One interesting thing that a tuple helps us to do is to make swap very, very simple. Let's say I have two values, x is equal to 0, y is equal to 1. You can assign it even in a simpler way. You can say x comma y is equal to 0 comma 1. This is a funky way of assigning values. The interesting part comes where I can do an thing like x comma y is equal to y comma x. So this creates a tuple with the values of y and x at this point in time. So the tuple which would be created is 1 comma 0, and that would be assigned and destructed again. So x becomes 1 and y becomes 0. So if you print the value of x now, it's 1 and y is 0. So the values referred by x and y are swapped. Another interesting tip is related to how do you create a tuple with one element, right? So if I say x is equal to 0, what would happen? What will be the type of x? It's of class int, right? How do I create a tuple with just one value? The way you can do that is by putting a comma. So you can do x is equal to 1 comma, and it's actually of type tuple. This is typically an interesting piece of code for people who would come from other languages. They would be worrying, oh, what does it really mean? In Python, this stands for a tuple. In this quick tip video, we looked at tuples. We started with creating a simple method which returns multiple values. We saw that the type of the return value when I take it into a variable is of type tuple. And we saw destructing a couple where we took a tuple and created 3 variables based on the values of it. We also looked at the fact that tuple supports simple indexing. So Ranga of 1, 2, and 3. We saw that tuple helps us to do things like swap very, very easily. At the end, we looked at an interesting syntax to create a tuple with one element. I'll see you in the next tip. Until then, bye-bye.